You're listening to the Oh, Come On Sports Podcast with me, Natasha Stanishevsky. Come on now! Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You are listening to the first ever edition of the Oh, Come On Sports Podcast with myself, Natasha Stanishevsky, and my lovely co-host for the day, Al. Al, you are in Toronto. I'm in Calgary. What's going on? How are you?
What's happening, Natasha? And thank you for that rousing introduction. Lovely co-host is something I've never been called before, but I do appreciate it. And it's a beautiful day in Toronto. How is it in Calgary?
It is smoky. It's a little bit of smoky. Those wildfires in BC, man, they're burning up. All of Alberta's been really smoky lately. So it's beautiful. It's hot. It's sunny. But yeah, smoky is the first thing that comes to mind. So
it's great to be here with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is going to be fun. I'm glad you're here with me too. I think we should explain what we're doing here. It's a sports podcast. You have a betting background. I know nothing about betting, full disclosure. I mean, I know a few things, not a lot, but this podcast is going to be mostly about sports, whatever is happening, good stuff, bad stuff. We're going to keep it light. It won't be that serious. Whatever comes around, we might even talk about, I don't know, baking, who knows, other things like that. But you're going to weigh in with your betting opinions once in a while too. So we have that layer to the podcast. And we'll see how it goes. You're a huge sports fan, right? You have a Seattle jersey on right now. I guess the listeners can't see, but you're wearing a Seahawks jersey.
I am proudly wearing a Seahawks jersey.
Okay.
You know what? I am. This is a Marshawn Lynch beast mode jersey, so I'm a big Marshawn Lynch fan, and I will have my Kraken jersey soon enough because I think the jerseys are kind of hot. But no, this is in honor of the expansion draft that just happened. A couple days ago now. So I know we're going to be talking about that. So I'm getting into the right frame of mind with my Seattle jersey on. And you're right. I do have a betting background. I've been in the gambling business for 15 years, but more importantly, I've been a Canadian sports fan for 40 plus years. So I'm excited to talk about sports, and we can layer in some betting here and there as we need to, but this is a sports podcast to your point.
Okay. Like you said, the Kraken had a big day the other day. We have to talk about that. However, the Olympics are underway, and we have a very special guest joining us later in the show that I want to mention. Anna Merklinger, who is the CEO of Own the Podium, will join us, which I think is going to be awesome. She will give us all kinds of, background on the athletes, how they've been doing over the last year and a half since COVID threw a wrench into everything. There's lots going on with them. They managed to get to the Olympics, which is awesome. So we're going to hear from her. However, we're living in Canada, which means you can talk about hockey any day of the week, any day of the season. It's the middle of summer, but we're talking hockey because the Kraken had their expansion draft the other day. And I think you said you're a Leafs fan, right?
I am, and I don't appreciate the tone of voice you took when you said you're a Leafs fan. Just FYI, let's just be clear about that. I did detect a little tone of, I'll call it jealousy. It's okay, although, I know the Leafs were in the playoffs. I don't think Calgary made it, if I remember correctly. If I remember correctly. But anyway, listen, I am a Leafs fan. And hold on, I know you're an Oilers fan. Is that not true? Living in Calgary?
Just hang on a second, because I am still an Oilers fan, born and raised in Edmonton. I just moved to Calgary last month. I do not think I will be switching allegiances. I did not switch allegiances when I lived in Toronto for 10 years, so I'm not about to start. So yes, I'm still an Oilers fan. So if you're a Leafs fan, I'm an Oilers. Even if you're a Leafs fan, none of us have much to cheer about or be proud of lately.
True enough. It's amazing you say that, and it's funny that there's all these inter-city rivalries within Canada. But at the end of the day, I'm a Canadian, and I was cheering for the Canadian team, right? As much as it pains me to say this, I was cheering loud and proud for the Habs in the Stanley Cup final, and that's almost a sin, right? When you're in Toronto to cheer for the Habs. But the fact that they were the Canadian contingent, I was very, very proud of how they played, even though they took the Leafs out. I was very proud of how they played. So I was cheering very, very loudly for those guys.
That's good. I think a lot of people were. I think that was an easy team to cheer for. Montreal's pretty likable, even if you are a Leafs fan. So it's too bad that they didn't get the job done. I think most hockey fans in Canada at this point would be happy to see any Canadian team win. I think most just because it's been so long.
It has been so long.
Somebody needs to get it done soon. So
I know you are let's call you the hockey expert of the two of us. So I'm going to ask you right away. Let's talk about Seattle. And if you had to give the Kraken a grade on their performance of the expansion draft, what are you giving them? What is Professor Natasha grading the Seattle Kraken GM Ron Francis on his endeavors a couple nights ago?
Okay, first of all, expert is way too strong. I do not call myself an expert, but I do love hockey. In terms of before I even get into a grade, what I'm going to say right off the top is I was a little disappointed how first thing in the morning, we already knew basically every single person who Seattle was picking. There was no secrecy anymore, like nothing. I mean, insiders and analysts, they're breaking stuff all the time now. There's no intrigue anymore. There's no suspense, which I'm kind of disappointed in. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know if that's on the NHL or on the team, but that was a little disappointing to me.
I would agree. I think I know that at about 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd already seen that Carey Price was sticking, and and who was and Larson was going. So it is a little anticlimactic, isn't it? Right? There's an expectation that you're going to get the reveal of this news towards the end of the day, and then through the course of the day, these little tidbits. I completely agree with you. We see it across a lot of sports, though, right? I mean, I know I'm a big NBA fan. I'll call myself an NBA guy. And there's a lot of times I know there's trade deadlines and free agent deadlines, but yet we're hearing news, 3, 4, 5 days before. And the NBA also has anti-tampering rules, which seem to be kind of non-existent in terms of enforcement, right? Because we hear all this information. So I completely agree with you. It is a little anticlimactic.
That aside, I did watch it, and I thought it was pretty fun. I thought it was a little cheesy, but that's okay. These things are hard to not be cheesy. But for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. It was nice that they had some of the players there putting on their jerseys. What did you think of it?
Did you happen to see Marshawn Lynch, my jersey sake here, announcing and Gary Payton and Sean Kemp? It is hilarious. If you haven't seen it, anybody who's listening, please YouTube it because it is absolutely hilarious. I thought it was great, right? I thought they did a good job of incorporating some real Seattle landmarks. I have spent some time in Seattle myself. I have some family out there, so the fish market and then the Needle and everything. I thought it was actually really cool. A little bit corny, I suppose, but it was. I think it was kind of in good taste, I think.
Totally. I was laughing. I forget who they made announce Jonas Donskoy, which is one of the most difficult things to pronounce, and I forget who it was. Of course, they butchered it. Poor guy.
I would butcher it. Never mind.
Your name. Exactly. So that was funny. It was fine. But to get back to your question about what they did, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious they did really well on defense. Ron Francis is sort of a more conservative guy, or at least that's the way he was with Carolina, and he seemed to have taken that same approach this time around, which I think is fine. I'm not sure about this goaltending situation that they have, but defense wins championships. I'll give you that.
Definitely.
So at least they have a solid defense on forwards. I mean, I'm not sure who's going to score all their goals.
That's the question.
Gordon Everly's on there, Yanni Gourde. I'm not sure, but I guess I give them a C. A C at this point.
A C. Okay. No. Okay. So that's not. I know C's very well from my school days. So yeah, I'm very familiar with that grade actually. And I'll agree with you. I mean, I think that I was more surprised by what they didn't do. Right. So my grade, and I'm going to take the easy cop out here, and I'm going to say incomplete because I don't think they're done yet. Right. Mm-hmm. I think that there was a very cautious / timid approach to the draft. Right. I think the Carey Price thing is one thing by itself, and there's salary cap implications, of course, and everything else. But I think you're right. What they've done is really identify an identity of the team, right, which is really focused on these big, fast-skating defensemen. But I have the same question as you: who is scoring goals, right? Besides Eberle, where's the offense coming from? So I think in goal, I think. Look, realistically, between their 1A and 1B option. So what was that? Drija with the first one, and Vernick being the second one. They could have their goaltenders for under $5 million next year in terms of salary cap impact, right? Which is actually pretty good value if you think Drija took the Panthers to the playoffs this year. So there's it could be some undervalued assets that Ron Francis had, and we'll see. But I think they'll be active in the free agent market still. And I think there's a lot of trades to be had still. So I think the team that we'll see come October, whenever it is, will be a little different from the team we see now. So I'm going to say incomplete.
Incomplete. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Francis has a few tricks up his sleeve. I would hope so, at least. As a fan, I was really hoping that he was going to pick Carey Price. I knew the chances were slim, maybe 1%, but how crazy would that have been to see Carey Price leave Montreal, go all the way to the other side of the country and join a new team? And I know he has that big contract. Now maybe there's an injury situation. So it would have been a very risky move, super bold, but you obviously need goaltending to win.
You do.
I don't think Vegas proven yet. And when you look at Vegas, I mean, that was half their battle, was getting Marc-Andre Fleury, right? Who was the face of the franchise. So it worked for them. Would it have worked for Seattle? I don't know. But just from a fan perspective, I was really hoping they were going to.
Me too. Me too. You know, it's funny you talk about risk and risky moves and stuff. And if you find that those GMs who have the ability to pull off those risky moves, I mean, I'm a basketball guy again, so we'll take it back a couple of years when Masai goes out and rents Kawhi Leonard for a year and ask any Raptors fan in the city, and they'll say it was well worth it to lose DeRozan, one of our real hometown boys, but we got a championship out of it. So we'll see how Ron Francis plays his cards over the next couple of months. Given that you're such an Edmonton fan, how did you feel about? You lost a real key piece, right, to that team. That is going to be the cornerstone. Him and Giordano, Larson and Giordano, will be the cornerstone of that defensive group out in Seattle. So how did you feel as an Oilers fan losing someone as impactful as Larson?
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed. Obviously, I wish he would have stayed. I'm not sure why he wanted to leave. I would love to know the reasons behind that. Mm-hmm. It seems to be hard to get people to come to Edmonton. I'm not sure. I need to figure it out a little bit more. You hate to lose defensemen. They're so hard to find. They're so hard to find good defensemen out there. So yeah, not a great day for the Oilers, I would say.
Absolutely. I think, and we talked a little bit about the Habs earlier, and I think in terms of image, who came out the best is Bergevin from the Canadiens, because he reminded me of Chris Moneymaker in the 2003 World Series of Poker, right? This was I'm a gambling guy, right? So I have gambling in my blood, and this was very much a high stakes poker move where he pretty much challenged the Seattle Kraken and said, "Okay, here he is. I don't think you're going to pay the $10.5 million salary cap hit to take him." And he came out looking like kind of the real puppet master, because he was able to save Jake Allen, keep him in the Habs uniform, which I think was the primary goal all along, right? I think that team doesn't get to the playoffs last year without Jake Allen. Carey Price played great in the playoffs. He did amazing, but they don't get there without Jake Allen. And I think he was the real piece that they wanted to hold on to. And I mean, he came out of that holding on to both goalies, right? Again, and if by whatever chance Carey Price had left, that leaves him with Jake Allen and $10.5 million in cap room, which in the NHL is a lot of money to acquire a lot of assets. So I think he played it really well. I think Kyle Dubas for sure. Go back to the Leafs, of course. Similarly, right, had a very, very successful kind of expansion draft. I think he took that player and flipped him within 3 or 4 days. I think the guy didn't even get a chance to get to Toronto and ship him off to Seattle. So I think Dubas came off looking really good as well. So I was pleased with the way it worked out for the Leafs. Okay, well, we'll give Bergevin an A+, I guess, for the way he definitely. Dubas, I don't know. A-? I'm not sure. A-. Doesn't matter. We'll see. But yeah, this Seattle Kraken, I'm excited to see what they do. I feel like so far as a franchise, they've done a great job. I love their jerseys for whatever that's worth. I love their little video that they put out last year on Twitter. It was super exciting. So we'll see. The other thing I actually hope that happens is they get a bit of a rivalry going with Vancouver, which is hard to manufacture these things maybe, but I hope something happens to get this going, to get some good competition between the two. But Vancouver seems so far away. I mean, Edmonton and Calgary are here, but even they seem far from Vancouver. So I think now that there's Vancouver does seem removed, doesn't it? A little bit kind of out in left field over there, and they don't get a lot of the love from the rest of Canada for sure. I completely agree. It'd be great to see a rivalry develop between the two, and given the geographic proximity, it's ripe for a rivalry, right? And then I can see the Canadian fans going strong into the Seattle arena to cheer on the Canucks. So I agree with you. I hope that does develop into a heated rivalry. Yes, agreed. Okay, well, we could talk about hockey all day, obviously. All day. But we have to get to the Olympics. We are going to speak to Anne Merklinger, CEO of Own the Podium, in a few moments. But before we get to her, I'd love to know your thoughts on the Olympics, Al. They're underway. The opening ceremonies are about to get going. Do you like the Olympics? Do you kind of have to watch? What's your take? Absolutely. I suppose it's kind of a silly thing to say, but the older I get, the more patriotic I seem to get. And, I'm super, proud to be a Canadian, proud of the guys that we have over there. I love the Olympics because, again, I'm someone who worked in sports for a long, long time. So I watch and consume a lot of sport. And what I find really interesting about the Olympics is just some of the more obscure sports that you get to watch, right? So I don't necessarily get to watch BMX biking or taekwondo or track and field, right? I mean, and where else does the crescendo of an entire year of sport happen within 10 seconds? Like it's just the most amazing buildup, and then this huge release of passion for that 10 seconds. I mean, if you think about an NHL champion is 16 games, and even a heavyweight champion of the world in boxing, that's 12 rounds. That's a good 2-hour fight. This happens in 10 seconds. And I just, something about it is really exciting and emotional for me. So I'm really excited about track and field and watching some of these sports that I don't necessarily get to watch all the time, because you develop an appreciation for what some of these guys can do. Again, I think we see this or I see this anyway, as a 2-week window. But for these guys, this is years and years of practice at their craft, and I want to give them the appreciation of being able to enjoy it on TV. So I'm very, very excited to. I've already been watching some of the Canadian women's soccer. I saw Christine Sinclair score a nice goal. So yeah, I'm very excited to cheer on my fellow Canadians as loud as I can. Hopefully, they can hear me from all the way over here.
Totally. Yeah. No fans this year. So you are going to have to cheer. No fans in Tokyo. So you are going to have to cheer extra loud.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm with you. I love the Olympics. It takes me a while to get into it sometimes, but once you see those first few athletes get on the podium and get those medals, all of a sudden I'm just all in. And I think as much as I love seeing the athletes that we already know, like Christine Sinclair, perform, it's the sort of surprising performances or the athletes that I've never heard of for Canada who come out of nowhere and like gutsy performances and somehow claw their way onto the podium. Those are the things that I love seeing. And it's funny, maybe it's just because I'm here in Calgary now. I was thinking the other day to some of my favorite Olympic memories, and Elizabeth Manley stands out for me. I don't know if you were watching female figure skating in 1988 back in Calgary, but that performance of hers, I was 10 years old at the time, and it left such an impression on me. Just the fans, how crazy they were, and just how amazingly she performed. And it's still on YouTube, Al, if you want to go watch it. She's got her.
I do. You know what? I have.
The music is hilarious, but unreal. It's just great. Yeah, you have to watch
I have this memory. I have this vision. I have this still picture burned into my head when you say the name Elizabeth Manley. I think of her and this blonde hair and this pink dress and just, exhausted passion, on the ice. And I don't remember much about the routine other than this one still image that's just stuck in my brain. Was she wearing a pink dress by any chance? Do I got this right?
You have it 100% right. Yeah.
Okay. I am going on YouTube to watch that after we're done this, because it's been a long, long time. I was a young 13-year-old boy at the time. And again, that's many, many years ago. But I still have this vision ingrained in my head. And that just speaks to how special the Olympics and outside of the realm of regular sport, how special the Olympics really are.
Totally, there is nothing like them. And with that, enough out of us. Let's bring in our guest, Anne Merklinger, the CEO of Own the Podium. And we are so happy to have you. How are you doing this morning?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for inviting me to this terrific initiative, and congratulations on launching the podcast.
Thank you so much. This is such a good time to be starting this because of the Olympics. Love the Olympics. Both Al and I are super excited for this to get going. How are you feeling about it? Canada sending the largest team since 1984. Obviously, it's been a very strange year and a half with COVID and the delay. What is your sense from the team right now, from the athletes and coaches as they settle into Tokyo?
Well, we've already started competitions. So as you know, both women's soccer and women's softball have already had, 2 matches for softball and 1 for women's soccer. So that's typically what happens at the Summer Olympic Games anyways, where a number of sports have to start prior to the opening ceremonies. And certainly from all accounts, the first week of athletes and coaches and staff, they have arrived and are settling into the village and checking out all the great Team Canada kit that they receive and, becoming familiar with their surroundings. The opening ceremonies are tomorrow morning, so different, obviously, Tokyo time, so it'll be evening for them. But there's just a real air of excitement and anticipation and it's kind of like, let's get started. So it's a real exciting time. The anticipation for the athletes and the coaches and the staff, really a culmination of all of their hard work, and the games are about to begin.
That's very cool. I know you say there the hard work, and Natasha and I were talking a little bit earlier. And for me specifically, the Olympics are this 2-week period where it's a lot of fast and furious action, and then it's over. But for these guys, this is the culmination of a life's work, pretty much. And so I can't imagine the feeling of accomplishment and anticipation and desire and everything else that's built into that 2 weeks. You also mentioned the village, and so obviously we're in a bit of a crazy time right now with COVID. How has the dynamic changed in the village from what with the restrictions that are in place? I've seen some stuff on TV, and of course it's TV is TV, but around some of the restrictions around congregating for meals and the like. And so how has that been different for the athletes?
Well, it's very different. It's very unusual. It's a games like no other, and hopefully it's a games that we will never have to experience again. We're just so grateful for the Japanese host to be able to execute the games and provide these athletes and coaches the opportunity to fulfill their lifelong dream of competing in the Olympic Games. So, the Japanese hosts actually we should get the first gold medal for making the games happen. So, I know all the Canadian team and all Canadians should be very grateful for that. I think the village is there's very strict protocols. There's very strict rules around where people can and cannot go. But frankly, there were very strict protocols and rules when the team got on the plane leaving Canada. So, and those rules and protocols have been very thoroughly communicated in advance. So there's no surprises. Everyone knew what the expectations would be in Tokyo. They knew what rules they needed to follow. They knew what they could and couldn't do. I think for Team Canada, that's kind of been what the last 16 months has been like. They have had very strict protocols. The return to training and return to competition because of COVID was very, very strict. The protocols that were identified were very thorough. They were evidence-based, driven by sport medicine experts. And so that's been the environment that the Canadian team has been in for the last 16 months. So in many respects, having been in that kind of environment with very strict quarantine procedures, strict protocols, it's almost like a competitive advantage for Team Canada. They can go into Tokyo knowing that they've survived the last 16 months. They've had some incredible performances without many opportunities for competition. And it's kind of like, okay, we got through the last 16 months and now we're here in Tokyo, so bring it on. We can adapt to anything. They're extremely resilient, and they've shown that over the last 16 months.
Super cool.
I can't imagine the sort of modifications that the athletes and coaches have had to make over the last year and a half. Can you just talk about how difficult the training might have been more than usual in the last year and a half, just trying to adapt to all the safety protocols, and whether or not you think it will have a significant impact on the results at the games?
Yeah, I think it really varies by sport. So outdoor sports, they may not have had, the length of the quarantine or the length of the, protocol, or the protocols that they had to endure may have been a little less than indoor sports, where you're obviously in a much more confined environment, and it's much more challenging for them. And so it really did vary by sport. So it varied by whether you're a combat sport or a team sport. So it's really kind of all over the map in terms of the impact on different sports. I would say that the opportunities that we saw as a result of the pandemic have been quite enlightening. So it was an extra year for athletes to be able to heal from nagging injuries, to look at any technical gaps that they may have had, to really spend a year in holistic development to make sure that they are in the best physical, emotional well-being that they could they could possibly be in heading into Tokyo. So that was a positive. We were very fortunate as a nation that virtually no athletes decided to not commit to the extra year, because obviously it was a 5-year commitment, quadrennial for athletes in preparing for the Tokyo Games. So virtually everyone committed to another year. So that was fantastic. I think also that, we were able to work with coaches and sport leaders to find innovative and creative solutions to get back to training. We've seen many of those stories where, there were backyard pools built out of hay, or, many athletes were so creative and solutions focused in finding ways to get back to training. So, I think those are all the positives. It's kind of, again, like, you've got this extra layer of body armor on you because you've been so adaptable, so resilient, and you carry that with you into the games, and it gives you an extra layer of confidence heading into the games. So I think that's a real positive for Team Canada.
Very interesting. Very interesting. The most traditional way to measure success at Olympic Games is obviously a medal count, right? We all see the medal count that goes on TV, and we're paying attention and stuff. How do athletes measure success beyond just medals at the Olympics? Is it purely like the accomplishment of getting a medal, or I'm sure there's other things that me as a regular Canadian, kind of layman wouldn't understand. So how do athletes measure success at Olympic Games? And especially this one, given that it's so unique versus the ones we've seen in the past.
Well, great question. I think there's a number of different measures of success for these particular games compared to others, both for the athletes and for the Canadian Olympic Committee and for our country. So first and foremost, to ensure that every member of Team Canada arrives safely and healthy in Japan, and they are able to get to their start line or their, the opening kickoff or whatever sport they're in a safe and healthy manner, and then that they can return home and be safe and healthy, and that our Japanese hosts are protected as well from COVID. So those are all measures of success that are pretty unusual. Every athlete that goes to an Olympic Games or a Paralympic Games, they have a personal goal. They have a personal performance goal. And so when you actually get to the games, it's not so much about focusing on the goal, it's focusing on the process that you need to follow to achieve that goal. Gotcha. So at this point, as athletes are getting ready to compete, it's all about, follow the plan, focus on the process, don't worry about the outcome. Of course, they're going to think about the outcome, but you do that after. Like, you have to follow the plan and focus on the process, and that's really what will be going through their minds as they prepare for competition.
It's very cool.
Trust in the process. It's so easy to say, but it's so tough to do sometimes, right? All you want to think about is standing on that podium, but you can't. You have to just focus on your routine and try and keep everything the same, I would imagine, which makes me wonder about the heat in Tokyo. Obviously very different from Tokyo to Canada when it comes to the temperatures. Are the athletes able to train for that? Are they able to prepare for that in any way?
Yes, we as a technical agency worked very closely with our sport medicine experts and sports science experts over the last 2.5 years, frankly, to make sure that our heat strategy to help athletes acclimatize, recover, hydrate during training and competition was customized. So it was customized by individual athletes and customized for each sport. So that's been a 2.5 year project, really driven again by the sport medicine and sports science experts in our country, of which they've just been so generous in committing their time and expertise to help athletes prepare and compete during Tokyo.
Amazing to think of how many people are involved in the success. Again, it sounds like such a ridiculous statement for me to say because it sounds so simple, but how many people are involved in their efforts and their expertise in, creating what we see on TV as representation of Canada, right? There's so much stuff in it. It's cool to hear an internal person talk about it, versus what we see, which is the end result without seeing the process, as you guys have talked about so much.
Yes, well, there's 800 people in Tokyo, so those are athletes, coaches, staff.
800 on the Canadians
on the Canadian contingent for the Olympic Games, and there's going to be another 400 or 500 for the Paralympic Games, about 400, I believe. So on the heels of the Olympic Games are the Paralympic Games. So, you're upwards of 1,200 people right there on the ground in Tokyo. Then both the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee have a Canada-based mission team that is here supporting, shifted to Tokyo hours so that they can support the team. So there's another kind of, large number of people doing that and providing remote support because those two organizations aren't able to send as many people as they would normally have sent for both the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And then on top of that, all these athletes have been developed by national sport organizations, and they're kind of the unsung heroes. So the chief executive officers and the high performance directors and staff, and they vary in number and based on the size of the national sport organization, but they have worked, for a decade to help these athletes prepare and provide them with the resources and guidance to help them achieve their athletic goals.
Very interesting.
And then of course, there's the families and their friends who are back home, and none of them are able to be in Tokyo. And so, there are so many connections. In Canada, we have a group of Canadian sport institutes and centers, and they have an army of experts who also support the athletes in training and competition. So, there's a lot of people behind the scenes who, aren't able to be recognized as much as we would like to, who are really part of the performances of each of these individual athletes.
Very cool.
That's got to be tough without the families there for sure. I mean, that must be so amazing to have your family there watching you competing and to not have them there this year. I imagine there was really no way around it though, really.
Yeah, the host organizing committee ruled that there could be no fans in any of the venues. But I think as we start to follow the broadcast, our host broadcaster and other major television networks here in Canada, we will see some creative opportunities where the families are able to engage with their, sons and daughters, partners, and help celebrate their performances. And we've already seen that through some of the trials that have been hosted here in Canada. So both the Canadian Olympic Committee and Canadian Paralympic Committee are going to do everything possible to connect these families and friends with the athletes.
Absolutely. Very cool.
Good. That's good. That's good to know. You sort of touched on it before, just in terms of training around COVID and all the safety protocols. Can you think of any specific stories about athletes or teams, just sort of wacky, creative ways that they got around some of the, not around them, of course they were bypassing them, but just ways they had to modify their training because of COVID?
I know that many of the Canadian Sport Institutes and the national sport organizations worked with their strength and conditioning providers to their experts to equip athletes with the strength and conditioning equipment that they needed to be able to train at home, because for many weeks, athletes, all of us, we weren't able to leave our homes. We were kind of in lockdown. And so there was, a good 8 to 10 weeks where that was applicable across our entire country. And so, being able to acquire the equipment, and both the Canadian Olympic Committee and Canadian Paralympic Committee helped with that as well. And then their sport science practitioners had to write programs for them to be able to follow. There were virtual training sessions for many of the athletes. There were virtual team training sessions where they could do, different technical and tactical kind of, movements to try and stay connected. So it's really been interesting to watch, that innovation and that creativity and that positive outlook. I mean, no one ever gave up. It's quite remarkable, the mental strength and the resilience that's been developed. And, it's great learning for us as an organization as well, because the majority of the sports were not able to compete as often as they would typically compete, both in Canada and abroad, heading into a major games. And still, we've seen some phenomenal performances. So after the Tokyo Games are over, our work really accelerates in identifying what are the lessons learned. Maybe some sports shouldn't train, or as maybe there's modifications that need to be made to different training regimens, and similarly to the competition structure. So that's really important reflection that will happen after the Tokyo Games.
Right. Interesting.
Very cool. Again, it speaks to how the Olympics process is so much longer than the 2 weeks, right? There's also this post-reflection period and this analysis period that you'll go into. And it's interesting you say that some of the modifications you've had to make out of necessity this year could be out of advantageous, kind of going down the road as things continue to modify and develop. So that's a very cool glass half full kind of view.
I got one more question for you, Anne. I just want to know, we are always proud of our athletes, but this year's been so much different. What will you be most proud of when you see the athletes on the so-called start line this year?
Well, I think for me, it's just the positive outlook and the determination and the perseverance. They have been so focused on solutions, so focused on what they can control, and they're not distracted by the uncontrollables. And so that mental strength has been truly remarkable. And so that's a significant takeaway. It's been a real challenge the last 16 months. And on top of that, many of the sports have been looking at other nations where the lockdowns and the quarantine periods and the quarantine rules have not been as challenging as what they've been here in Canada. But, they're not fussed by that. They're like, it is what it is. I can't control that. This is what we have to do, and let's get it done.
That's what makes them Olympians, I guess. That's why they're competing and I'm not, because I don't have that mental strength.
Well, you know what? We are fans, and we'll be cheering as loud as hopefully they can hear us all the way over there in Tokyo. I know we can't be there in person, but we will be cheering. I am in front of my TV cheering. I was cheering when Christine Sinclair scored that goal yesterday. I was jumping up and down on my couch yesterday, so I'm very excited to see the rest of the games. And it's really cool to have you here to give us the visibility, kind of the internal visibility as to stuff we don't necessarily see of the Olympics process. So thank you very, very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And there's nothing that makes me happier than seeing the Canadian flag raised on the podium and being able to belt out the national anthem. And while we can't do it in person, I know that all of us will be doing it and screaming at our TVs with every outstanding performance that Canada achieves in Tokyo.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to meet you both.
Huge thanks to Anne Merklinger, the CEO of Podium, to join us. Al, again, the mental strength, like she said, how disappointed were those athletes when they canceled the games last year, delayed them? And then, in some ways it was advantageous, but to keep that training going for a whole other year and a half and training in your living room or whatever, it's amazing. Just to even get to the games, it's amazing what the athletes have been able to accomplish so far.
And look, the thing that really spoke to me was the fact that families can't be there, right? Can you imagine someone who's been training for this for their entire teenage years, and this is it, right? This is the kind of the moment, and to not be able to have the people that supported you all the way there, that would be really, really, really trying. And again, a real test of the mental strength beyond just the physical strength involved in all this stuff. So it's a kudos and applause to those guys over there for their fortitude, for sure.
Exactly. Fortitude. Good words.
Fortitude.
All right. Word of the day. I think that's it for us. I think that's the end of our first episode. How you feeling? Feeling good?
Good. Yeah, it's good. No, I enjoyed it. We talked about hockey in the summer and we talked about the Olympics, right? So that's it's all good. I know there's a lot of fun stuff coming up, and I'm excited to be doing this with you a lot more often, Natasha. I think it's going to be fun talking about sports with somebody so knowledgeable in sports, and I look forward to our next time we get to talk.
Me too. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and talk to you next week.
You're listening to the Oh, Come On Sports Podcast with me, Natasha Staniszewski. Come on now!